Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. It is August 23rd, 2020. We're running out of August. We're heading into September. Are you signed up to receive your weekly email? A rundown of all of the events, the topics we're going to be talking about. It's a once a week email sent to you to alert you. I don't send out very many other than that. I did this week. We've had technical problems. We're doing something a little different. But if you'd like to get one of these emails, tells you up front what's happening, send right to me at thebibleforum@gmail.com. We have all sorts of things going on in our world, not just here in our studio, but the world is in turmoil. The only news that really matters today is news relative to the movements in the Middle East. A huge case in point showed up this week called the normalization of relations between Israel and the U.A.E, the United Arab Emirates. The U.A.E is that country in the Sinai that juts out into the Gulf of Oman across from Iran. It's kind of a pinch point in the sea traffic in and out of the Persian Gulf. U.S. brokered an agreement to normalize relations between Israel and the U.A.E, the United Arab Emirates. Detractors in all of this see something that will reconfigure relations in the Middle East, and they don't really like change. In a 2019 poll, Pew Research poll, evangelical Protestants were found to be far more likely, 72% of them, than U.S. Jews, 47%, to say that Trump is striking just the right balance between Israelis and Palestinians. Conversely, and oddly, U.S. Jews are more likely than any other major religious group polled, other than the religiously unaffiliated, to say that Trump is favoring the Israelis too much. They register at 42%, compared with only 15% of evangelicals who would say the same thing. Now you got to keep in mind that American Jews are not all religious Jews. I guess the same is true in Israel, but it's a lot more here. In Israel, they're living in a pressure cooker over there because they are Jews. That adds a little dynamic to it. And now it appears that Sudan is looking forward to a similar agreement. Sudanese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Haidar Badawi al-Sadiq told Sky News Arabia, and it was also reported in the National, that Sudan looks forward to such an agreement with the Jewish state based on the highest interests of national security and of Sudan. And they added that there is no reason to continue hostility between Sudan and Israel. Sudan is just south of Egypt on the African continent. The Iranian leader then warned the U.A.E not to give Israel a foothold in the region, because if it did, he said, we will have a score to settle with them, and we'll deal with them differently. They must take heed. Back on August 17th, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said on Saturday that the United Arab Emirates' decision to normalize relations with Israel was nothing less than a betrayal of the cause of the Palestinians, the cause of the Muslims, and he added, and Jerusalem. On the other side of the world from us, in China, Chinese military journalists are publicly urging the People's Liberation Army to prepare immediately for an attack by U.S. forces in the South China Sea. You do realize we beefed up our naval vessels in that area. We've got at least 2, maybe 3 carriers running around out there, and all the other ships that go along with it. They also suggested that the regime reinforce Chinese installations on reefs claimed by China. These are reefs that every other nation of the world would say was not theirs. It's just out there. It's kind of in no man's land, but they've claimed them. And if this analysis gains traction in the Chinese political and military organs, U.S. military commanders in the South China Sea are looking for the possibility that China might just initiate hostilities. To do so in keeping with its doctrine of preemptive retaliation. Now, I don't know how you put those two words together. I'm going to attack you before you attack me because I knew you were going to attack me. It seems an attempt to falsely claim self-defense. One writer suggested that the PLA should immediately move fighter aircraft to Chinese air bases in the Spratly Islands at Fiery Cross, Subi Reef, and Mischief Reef. He also boldly claimed that the augmented presence of U.S. naval and air assets in the South China Sea is no longer just a show of force by America. He further warned that U.S. President Donald J. Trump is likely to initiate a military conflict in the South China Sea region before the November 3rd U.S. presidential election. He sees this as a possibility that we would stir up external frictions, especially military conflicts with China, to help the incumbent president in his re-election campaign. Generally, military leaders speculate about attacks based on what they would do if the tables were turned. We heard from Rush Limbaugh this week. I don't know if you got the message. I entitled this one, Oops, from Rush Limbaugh. He says the left has been pulling down statues of George Washington, the founder of our country, because, well, he owned slaves. They're doing the same to Thomas Jefferson because, well, he owned slaves. Alexander Hamilton, he owned slaves. Now they want to put in the Oval Office a woman who is a direct beneficiary of 5 slave plantations and more than 200 slaves. That would be Kamala Harris, or Kamala Harris, depending on who you talk to. Her family's wealth was created by virtue of these plantations. And the point here is that the reason she may be on the ticket is specifically because of what secured her defeat in the primaries, and that is a rabidly ultra-far-left radicalism. A liberalism they're counting on her using and employing, well, eventually as president. But you knew that, didn't you? You've been watching television. You watched the two of them in action, Kamala and Joe Biden. And you know which one has really got it together. The International Journal Review says you've seen them in war-torn cities across the U.S. Men in what appears to be battle dress, moving about amid the protesters. The commentators, observers, have correctly identified them as federal troops. But the question is, what are they doing? Attorney General William Barr revealed just this past Wednesday that task forces have made significant progress against violent crime since the launch of their Operation Legend. That's when these guys showed up in cities across the country. Appearing at a news conference in Kansas City, Missouri, Barr emphasized the importance of supporting law enforcement and announced several arrests have been made under the program. He said, rather than demonizing and defunding our police, we are supporting and strengthening our law enforcement partners at the state and local level. He added, so far, federal state task forces involved in Operation Legend have made almost 1,500 arrests. He says, I think it's 1,485 to be precise. But many of those arrests are for violent state crimes, including 90 homicides. How is it the federal guys can track down people and arrest them and the local guys don't know where they are? Operation Legend was launched on July 8 and began in Kansas City. later expanded to Chicago and then Albuquerque. The program is sustained, systematic, and coordinating law enforcement initiatives across all federal law enforcement agencies, working in conjunction with state and local law enforcement officials to fight the sudden surge of violent crime. That was the official statement by Mr. Barr. The initiative was created as a result of President Trump's pledge to help cities suffering from recent violence. The name Operation Legend comes from Legend Telefero, a 4-year-old who was shot and killed in Kansas City on June 29th. As an aside, I might mention to you, we've got one here in Somerville, South Carolina. The police have been up and down one of our roads, Trolley Road, for the last several weeks, 2 and 3 police officers stationed all along that highway, and we wondered why. And today a sign showed up. Does anybody know anything about the murder of 5-year-old? And they named the child's name. You can't hide. Barr said Legend's death is a horrifying reminder that violent crime left unchecked is a threat to us all and cannot be allowed to continue. Barr released a statement on July 29 announcing the Trump administration would be sending additional agents to Cleveland, Detroit, and Milwaukee, indicating these cities have seen increases in violent crime, especially homicides. Speaking of short-term memories, liberals seem to be up in arms over President Trump's executive order banning certain nationalities from entering the United States. However, according to the draft copy of Trump's executive order, the countries whose citizens are barred entirely from entering the United States is based on a bill that former President Obama signed into law December 2015. Can you say oops? Obama signed the Visa Waiver Program Improvement and Terrorist Travel Prevention Act as part of an omnibus spending bill. The legislation restricted access to the Visa Waiver Program, which allows citizens from 38 countries who are visiting the United States for less than 90 days to enter without a visa. The publication, The Atlantic, laid out what this bill will and will not do. But most importantly, the publication adds that this technically is not a Muslim ban, as people from Indonesia, the world's most populous Muslim country, can still visit the country. The ban includes 7 majority Muslim countries, but by no means are these states the most populous Muslim countries, nor are they among the top sources of Muslim immigration to the U.S., nor have they produced terrorists in the same numbers as other Muslim countries not on the list. Did you watch the Democrat National Convention last week? I'm not a fan of watching canned speeches with no possibility of error. I didn't watch any of it. I probably won't watch the Republicans either, except when it pops up on the news. But Mrs. Obama referenced kids in cages. Do you remember that? She's talking about those children kept at the border because they don't have parents or legal guardians with them. She doesn't answer the question as to why. That's a whole nother story, which is horrible in itself. That has nothing to do with the U.S. But all this began in 2014. In 2014, she was living in the White House. Wasn't a problem then. President Trump promised to get tough on the border and immigration enforcement. So, of course, when the Obama-era cages at DHS detention centers were re-photographed, all of this happened because Trump was elected. The report was, quote, "They watch in horror as children are torn from their families and thrown into cages." But the facts are that The idea of cages is misleading and something Democrats have persistently distorted. Trump used facilities that were built during the Obama administration to house children at the border. They're chain link enclosures inside border facilities where migrants were temporarily housed, separated by gender and age. At the height of the controversy over Trump's zero tolerance policy at the border, photos began to be circulated online of children in enclosures, generating a tremendous amount of anger. But those photos by the Associated Press were taken in 2014. And they depicted some of the thousands of unaccompanied children held by President Barack Obama. When all this came to light, some Democrats and activists who had tweeted the photos deleted their tweets. But prominent Democrats, not necessarily caring a whole lot about currency, contemporaneous ideas, or even truth, have continued to cite these cages for children as a distinctive cruelty of Trump. Oh, she also garnered the most approval of any speaker, even her husband, by more than double. Watch her. If she wasn't so stinking rich in her own right with all the things that she's doing, she'd probably be in politics. Do you use the U.S. Postal Service? Have you not known that the U.S. Postal Service has been running a deficit as long as I've been on the planet? If you didn't know that, you just weren't paying attention. But now President Trump is being accused of sabotaging the November elections because he won't give the postal unions and incompetent managers in the Postal Service $25 billion to play with. The issue here? The ability of American voters to simply mail in their vote. You've watched this debate. Do you understand it? It's a little difficult if you're not really paying attention or you're not too smart, because they're using terminology interchangeably that makes it sound like something it really isn't. But the debate itself is pure third grade. Democrats equating absentee ballots with mail-in ballots, and Republicans trying to explain the difference, with the media keeping the whole thing going. In the mix is a postal inspector general trying to explain the need to make the Postal Service profitable, at least break even, which it has never done. The hue and cry is that mail collection boxes are being removed. People are now going to be limited as to how to get their mail in and their ballots mailed out. But again, history is cruel. The removal of these mailboxes is not a Republican thing. It's been going on for years. They're outdated. People don't use them anymore. And they're dangerous. They collect things that stink and blow up. It started during the Obama years. Thousands of freestanding mailboxes were removed. That total is now over 12,000. Did you know that Amazon and other mass mailers use the Postal Service to mail their products to your home? You did, because you get them. Why would they do that? Unless it's cheaper than anything else. The U.S. Postal Service is behind in raising the rates. Oh, joy. But this current dust-up is not about postal rates or the post office. It's about getting Democrats elected to president. If we can just mail in our ballot. But if we mail in ballots, all control is gone. Did you know the left is arguing for mail-in ballots, citing the current use of such devices? It always goes the same way, and whoever's arguing for it always makes the same argument. The President and the First Lady do it, Vice President Pence does it, and so do many, many more. That they cannot see the difference between ballots being sent to people who request them for acceptable reasons and who are known, as well as the reasons, you can't do it just for anything, versus sending unsolicited ballots to millions of people on a mailing list, confident that those ballots are going to be handled legally and properly. And then there's the issue of time. It is possible in this situation that an election would not be finalized for months. What don't they understand here? Oh, wait, they do understand, don't they? That's the whole point. It's terrible. Democrat nominee Joe Biden has recently released a campaign video in which he credits his Catholic faith, Pope Francis, and the example of nuns for his personal inspiration. It's a short video. It was released on August 9 on the Democrat National Convention's Twitter account. The tweet says, "This is the kind of moral conviction we need in the President of the United States." That's the lead in to the video. However, Biden's use of nuns as an inspirational example of generosity to others comes despite his promise to renew legal action against the Little Sisters of the Poor. They're Catholic nuns. If he's elected, he's gone after them. Biden has promised to remove freedom of conscience protections which exempt the sisters from the contraceptive mandate, opening them back up to renewed lawsuits by the federal government for failure to provide contraceptives to their employees, young women. Shortly after the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Little Sisters of the Poor, that was in July 8, Biden threw the nuns under the proverbial bus, saying that he was disappointed by the decision. And he promised to reinstate Obama-era policies requiring the sisters to ensure access to birth control in violation of their religious beliefs. It's Obama's Affordable Care Act that forces nuns to support abortion, specifically the contraception mandate. They've been battling this in court for 9 years. Biden says, if I'm elected, I will restore the Obama-Biden policy that existed before the Supreme Court's Hobby Lobby ruling, providing an exemption for houses of worship and an accommodation for nonprofit organizations with religious missions. Just not the nuns, apparently. Long-standing threats from both the U.S. and China to tear the two countries apart, to eliminate their interdependent economies, are finally giving way to reality. Axios.com's chief technology correspondent, Ina Fried, writes from San Francisco, China has long manufactured a great deal of the parts and hardware used in U.S. tech products. It has also become a major consumer market for certain American tech giants, including Apple. The U.S. provides the software and semiconductors that much of the Chinese tech runs on. Now, through action by both countries, the arrangement is breaking down. There's a school of thought that companies like U.A.E. will emerge stronger from the U.S. bans, expanding their global presence without the encumbrance of fending off American threats. But don't expect to see iPhones being made in the U.S. If anything, production will shift to another low-cost, labor-rich market, maybe Vietnam or India. These are the things that have been going on while you weren't paying attention, while your life was focused other places. When we come back, we'll look at some things that happened around home. Stay with me.